This apartment is mine, and you are nobody. The words didn't echo. They landed. Heavy. Final. Like a judge's gavel slamming down on my life. He shoved the divorce papers into my chest, so hard the edges bit my skin. I remember the smell of his cologne. Expensive, sharp, mixing with the cheap ink of the signatures he'd already practiced in his head. His face was red, triumphant. Certain. I didn't cry. That seemed to bother him more than if I had. My name is Avery Collins. I was his wife for 7 years. I paid for this apartment with my savings, my bonuses, my quiet nights of overtime while he chased titles that never stuck. But that night, standing barefoot on our hardwood floor, I let him believe his version of reality. Fine, I said calmly. Too calmly. I'll go. He laughed. Actually laughed. Good. Take your clothes and disappear. I'll change the locks tomorrow. So I packed a suitcase. Slowly. Deliberately. He watched from the doorway, arms crossed, enjoying the performance. When I zipped it shut, I didn't look back. What he didn't see was what I did before I left. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I made calls. Quiet ones. For the next 2 days, I stayed with my sister, sleeping in a fog of exhaustion and clarity. My phone stayed silent. No messages from him. No curiosity. He assumed I'd left broken. On the 3rd night he came home from work. He turned the key, stepped inside, reached for the light switch, and screamed. Later, neighbors would say they thought someone had been stabbed. Because where our couch used to be, where our bed had been, the dining table, the shelves, the art, there was nothing. No warmth. No comfort. No proof of the life he thought he owned. Just a single object, centered perfectly in the living room, waiting for him. And when he understood what it meant, his howl shook the walls. Because that was the moment he realized. I hadn't lost anything at all. I had taken everything that mattered. And I was only just beginning. By the time my phone started buzzing, I was already awake. 6 missed calls. 3 voicemails. All from him. I didn't listen yet. I made coffee first. Slow. Careful. The way you do when your hands finally stop shaking after years of holding too much in. People assume the explosion comes after betrayal. For me, it came years before that night. The apartment wasn't just a place we lived. It was the scoreboard of a marriage where I kept paying and he kept winning applause. He liked to say, "I'm the man of the house," whenever friends came over. I smiled and refilled glasses while my credit card paid for the wine. He hated paperwork, numbers, receipts, called them small details. So I handled them. All of them. Furniture? Mine. Appliances? Mine. Internet, utilities, renovations? Mine. Even the couch he loved, the one he'd once said made him feel successful, was bought on my bonus after he'd been laid off again. But the real crack came 6 months before the divorce papers. That was when he stopped pretending gratitude and started acting entitled. Late nights. Short temper. A sudden obsession with reminding me how replaceable I was. "You should be careful," he told me once, half smiling. "You don't really bring much to the table emotionally." I remember nodding, agreeing, filing the sentence away like a document marked important. So when he screamed that apartment was his, something inside me finally clicked into place. He had counted on my silence. What he hadn't counted on was my memory. After that night, I replayed everything with surgical clarity. Every offhand insult he disguised as a joke. Every eye roll when I talked about work. Every time he introduced me as the practical one, like it was a flaw. The manipulation wasn't loud. That's how it survived. It came in small, reasonable-sounding sentences. Why do you need separate accounts? Marriage means sharing. You're being dramatic again. I stopped arguing because arguing cost energy and I was already funding the whole life. He learned quickly that if he pushed just enough, I'd back down to keep the peace. The first time I noticed something was truly wrong was at a dinner with his colleagues. One of them congratulated him on finding a wife who could support his ambitions. He didn't correct them. He squeezed my knee under the table instead, a silent warning not to speak. On the drive home, I asked him why. He shrugged. It's just easier if people think I'm the successful one. That was the moment I understood. My success embarrassed him. From then on, the disrespect escalated. He started borrowing money without asking, signing my name on small expenses, calling it temporary. When I confronted him, his voice went cold. You're my wife. What's yours is mine. I remember standing in the doorway that night, realizing I'd been demoted from partner to resource. So I started paying attention, not fighting, not accusing, just watching. And while he thought he was breaking me down, I was quietly learning how much power I still had. Enough, it turned out, to empty an apartment and a marriage without raising my voice once. I just hadn't shown him yet. The humiliation didn't happen behind closed doors. It never does. 2 weeks after he screamed me out, his company hosted a small celebration, an achievement dinner at a restaurant he loved. Exposed brick, dim lights, the kind of place that made him feel important.
He invited me.
Let's be civil, he said over the phone, voice rehearsed. People will expect you. I almost laughed. I wore a simple black dress. Nothing dramatic. Power doesn't need decoration. When I walked in, heads turned, not because I was flashy, but because I was calm, untouchable. He stood when he saw me, relief flashing across his face. He still thought he was in control. Midway through dinner, his boss raised a glass. Let's thank everyone who helped make this year possible. Then she turned to me, and especially Avery, for stepping in financially when things were unstable. Silence dropped like a plate shattering. My husband's smile froze. What? He said too loud. She blinked. The lease guarantor? The equipment purchases? HR said you were listed as dependent on her income. Chairs shifted. Someone coughed. I felt every eye on him as he stared at me, searching for an explanation I wasn't going to give. You told me, he hissed. You handled it quietly. I did, I replied.
Soft. Clear.
You just didn't listen. The boss frowned. Is everything okay? He stood up so fast his chair tipped. I need air. As he walked out, whispers followed him. Sharp, curious, irreversible. That was the first time the world saw the version of him I'd lived with for years. And it wouldn't be the last. Because that night, as I watched him unravel in public, I realized something important. Embarrassment was just the opening act. What came next would cost him everything he'd stolen from me. I didn't follow him outside. I stayed seated, finished my water, thanked his boss for dinner, and left with my spine straight. The cold air hit differently that night, cleaner, like something rotten had finally been exposed. Back at my sister's place, I let myself feel it. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a slow, aching grief for the version of myself who thought love meant endurance. I cried once, hard, into a towel so no one would hear. Then I stopped. Pain is loud at first, but clarity is quiet. And in that quiet, a plan began to form, not revenge fueled by rage, but by accuracy. I didn't want him to hurt. I wanted him to understand. I laid everything out on the kitchen table. Receipts, contracts, emails, bank statements. Years of proof. Not of betrayal, but of ownership. He had lived comfortably inside my work, my credit, my foresight. He had mistaken access for entitlement. So I did what I'd always done best. I organized. I spoke to a lawyer the next morning, then an accountant, then the building management. Every conversation was calm, polite, devastating. By the end of the week, the picture was clear. He thought I'd walked away with furniture. What I was actually taking was the foundation under his feet. And soon, he'd feel it crumble, slowly enough to know exactly why it was happening. He called me the morning the first notice arrived. You did this, he said, voice tight, like he was holding something together with his teeth. I pictured him standing in that hollow apartment, walls echoing, mail scattered on the floor. Notices from the bank, from the building, from places he didn't know my name was attached to. I handled what was mine, I replied. He laughed, short, panicked. You can't just remove yourself. That's not how marriage works. It is, I said, when the marriage is already over. By noon, his company accounts were frozen. Not out of malice, out of math. Every temporary loan, every shared expense traced back to me. The accountant was clinical. Numbers don't argue. He showed up at my sister's place that evening. I didn't open the door. I listened through it. You're ruining me, he said, knocking harder. People are asking questions. I look like a fraud. I rested my forehead against the wood. You are a fraud. Silence. Then softer, desperate.
Please.
We can fix this. That was the moment.
The shift.
When he finally understood, I wasn't angry. I was done. I slid the envelope under the door. Copies of the agreements. The timelines. The truth. Printed and undeniable. As his footsteps faded down the hallway, I felt something settle inside me. Steady. Irreversible. For the first time in years, the ground beneath me was solid. And he was the one falling. The fallout wasn't loud.
It was worse than that.
It was quiet. Friends stopped returning his calls. Invitations disappeared. At work, doors closed with polite smiles and no explanations. Reputation doesn't shatter. It thins until there's nothing left to stand on. He sent messages I didn't answer. You didn't have to destroy me. I never meant it like that. We built this together. The last one almost made me respond. Almost. Instead, I watched from a distance as reality caught up to him. He moved out of the apartment, my apartment, when the lease transfer finalized. I heard he'd taken a room with a coworker. Temporary, of course. Everything in his life was always temporary. We saw each other once more. Accidentally. A coffee shop near the courthouse. He looked smaller. Not physically, internally. Like someone whose reflection had finally told the truth. You planned this, he said, not angry anymore. Just tired. No, I replied. I prepared for it. He nodded slowly, as if testing the weight of that sentence. I thought you'd come back. I thought you knew me, I said. We stood there, two strangers sharing a past that no longer belonged to either of us. And when I walked away, I didn't feel victory. I felt closure. But the story wasn't finished yet, because the final lesson was still waiting to be delivered. The last message came a month later. Not from him, but from the building manager. They'd found something during a routine inspection of the apartment after he moved out. An envelope taped inside a kitchen cabinet, hidden behind the old fuse box. My name written across it in my handwriting. I went back one final time. The apartment smelled different now. Empty, neutral, like a place that had already forgotten us. I stood in the middle of the living room, the same spot where I'd left that single object the night he screamed. The mirror. Full length. Unforgiving. I remembered setting it there, angled just right. So when he turned on the lights, the first thing he'd see wasn't the emptiness. It was himself. Inside the envelope was the receipt for everything I'd bought. Highlighted. Organized. Dated. Along with a note I'd written, in ink, that didn't shake. You said I was nobody. So, I took back everything that made you somebody. I left the envelope on the counter for the manager and walked out without locking the door. Some people think revenge is about watching someone suffer. It isn't. It's about reclaiming yourself so completely that the person who tried to erase you can never touch you again. I didn't destroy him. I just stopped holding him up. And when I stepped into my new place, smaller, brighter, entirely mine, I turned on the lights and smiled. Because this time, everything I saw belonged to me.